Welcome. We're talking in stations today in EVE Online. It is October 7th, 2019. I'm here with my friend Ashterothi. How are you doing?
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and we are looking at a very interesting upcoming week, I believe.
Yeah, let's first get into a little bit of the past week. That we had some stuff break last week that started about a week ago, and that was some political changes that were going on. If you want to hear all about that, listen to Talking in Stations podcast for yesterday, the 6th. That'll be out today. And so there was also a ton of stuff coming out from CCP, and I'll just tick those off real quick. There was the monthly economic report that came out. There was the monthly security report that came out, and there were patch notes that came out all last week. And those, again, were discussed on Talking in Stations, the proper show. But there's all kinds of other stuff, little stories here and there, and stuff that are incredibly meaningful, but hard to figure out. And that's why we have Ashterothi here to help us figure that kind of stuff out.
Well, last week we saw a couple of setup events. Right now we're seeing a lot of buildup. I believe that we're heading towards like the end of the month, Vegas, big announcements, so we're going through this setup portion, which explains kind of a little bit about the October patch. But also we see, like last week, one of the big events that most people didn't really pay that much attention to was the 3rd anniversary of the coronation of Empress Katniss, the Empress of Amar. The reason why this is important is because in the story, she's completely restructured the military thanks to this. And everyone who is watching it is pretty convinced that that is some precursor to a larger event, either a full-on Amarian civil war or some sort of rising tension within the empire itself. We also, of course, this being October, there is traditionally a Halloween event, which is Crimson Harvest, which is the Blood Raiders, which is the opponent of the Amar. And we do see some new Halloween skins coming. So all of the pieces are in place. I don't know whether or not this is going to be the same as some of the previous events that we've had this year, where it's just like some celebration with the skills for kills and an image, and then like some skins you can buy on the store, or if it's going to be like one of the events that we used to see, where there are event sites and things to go do in space. It's unclear yet, but it is obvious that they're setting up at least some of the pieces to make Halloween special, and perhaps even continue on with the ongoing Blood Raider Amarian conflict.
Wow. So we were just looking at, there's so much. Where should we start? Let's see. Just looking at go ahead.
I was just saying that we could look at, first of all, we could look at today and see that, once again, the invasions, we have one world arc that is within contiguous highsec space, but we do continue to see the invasions push further outward. In fact, today, or earlier this week, although this isn't necessarily like that big of a change, Nullsec did note the fact that an invasion did bleed pretty deep into Nullsec as a perimeter. Now, it is worth noting that no foothold has appeared in Nullsec yet, so we do not have actual like Triglavians pushing into Nullsec per se, but they are beginning to scrape closer and closer to that edge.
Yeah, you can see here that in Curse, one is touched on. Now, explain why you have red areas and green areas on this map, so that, because I don't know if people understand how these things work. They're not like incursions, which are constellation-wide.
Right. So the way it works is that there is a central system, which is the home of the invasion, and that is known as the foothold. So this is the center point. It's where the world arc will spawn when it's time, etc. One jump from the foothold is what's known as the perimeter, and then one jump from there is the adjacent. So whether or not you're a foothold, an adjacent, or a perimeter decides what sites spawn during what phases, and also how much power or how extreme is the quote unquote weather effect within the invasion. So the closer you get to the foothold, the more difficult the sites, but also the bigger the agility buff, the drone nerf, and the hull hit point nerf, and the mining buff. all of those go up as you go in.
So are those the ones that are colored in red, or is red the activity on here? The circles.
I would assume that the red would be the foothold.
Yeah, like the main system. And then you have the satellite systems, which get less red, more green or yellow.
Right. So you've got the red foothold, and then it projects outward into the perimeter, and
Yeah.
then the adjacent.
And this can be found on your map in game if you turn on, what's it actually called? Invasions or?
Triglavian invasions.
Mm-hmm.
You can also look at incursions to see where those appear.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, especially now, like there's a lot of really weird stuff about the location of these invasions. For example, upon statistical analysis, we've discovered that it is far, far more likely for these invasions to hit a type or a blue star than a normal star. And it's also, of those blue stars, it is less likely to hit a type O blue star than you would expect based on statistical anomaly or statistical expectations. The reason why this is important is because blue stars in particular, and type O blue stars specifically, have been called out as extraordinarily important in the lore. This is that's the star that produces the Isogen 5 that would later go to create the Salient incident, which is arguably where all of this started. So if the Triglavians are interested in some sort of special property, it seems that they are particularly interested in some stars over others.
So when you talk about the Salient incident, that's a system that's inside of, what's it called? The Galente space.
Oh, shoot.
Not
I'm not sure the region.
Synchrotron, but it is, I should know this region just by memory.
Universal search, man.
I don't have it open right now. Here,
it's funny because we just went through it like a whole bunch of times for an invasion. But yeah, so
hold on.
It's called.
I got it right here.
Yep.
It's a system inside of Essence. Oh, I couldn't think of Essence, and that's where I used to spend a lot of time.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it is a system there, and where basically an event happened in the game that created an opening, or the openings to wormhole space. The wormholes opened, basically.
Right. So this was also known as the Apocrypha event because it is the creation of the wormholes, basically, for the Apocrypha expansion.
The Apocrypha expansion came in 2009.
Right. And this predated what the event that most people think about, which is Caroline Star, which would be the secondary explosion that was more or less put into play by the Salient incident. So.
Oh, interesting. Didn't know they were related.
Yeah, so the Salient incident caused an energy pulse that damaged the lattice around the sun that was being used, the W477 TAC-P, the star that would eventually become Caroline Star.
Mm-hmm.
The Salient event destabilized the star, which is why the Jovians ran, because they thought that the star was going to obliterate all of New Eden.
Yeah, what's interesting in EVE Online is you had essentially a world come alive in 2003, and a lot of players moved from other games to join it because it was the bigger version of what they had been playing. Other games were more limited. I'm thinking of Space and Beyond, Homeworld, and there's a few other games in there. And a lot of those people were like, okay, this game is cool and we like having, big clans essentially, but let's move to this bigger world. It's much bigger, and it's all one universe. So we'll fight over one space, one instance of space. And a lot of the lore initially was just backdrop. It was in the form of what's called chronicles. It's just a little bit of art with a story, and it was just a slice of life in this virtual world. There wasn't a strong storyline to begin with. And then you had, well, besides the backstory, but then you had a lot of Empire versus Empire lore in about 2006 and 2007 that came out. And that was based on faction warfare, where these empires that were coexisting, that had multiple histories together because they all came from the same source. Just like the world, right? The world has we all go back to Africa, but if you follow world history, you see that we go and split into nations, and then nations fight each other. And that's the same kind of thing that's happening here. But it was very kingdom-based. And then around 2009, a new dimension opened up that brought in a whole new sci-fi element to the game, which was um, precursor civilizations. In other words, ancient ones. And there was always an allusion to ancient ones through the Jove, but the Jove were untouchable. They were a race that we were never going to play. But that was like the one alien race that existed. But now there's multiple, and you have wormholes that start to play with time and space and all that kind of stuff. So that's how lore. That's a very, very big picture of how lore has existed in the past. And now we're at a point where abyssal space are coming in with these Triglavian type precursor aliens, and they're now coming out of those holes that were abyssal space, and they're invading. And that's what these systems are that you're seeing here. These are invasion areas, and they're like incursions. Incursions are a bit different, and I think there's a whole different way of taking these things on.
Right. So while incursions are more predictable, they're more like structured events and sites. The invasions use a lot more random elements to make them less about like having the correct equipment and doing it as fast as possible, and more about being flexible and adapting to the various different challenges that they might face. You're not always going to get 6 neuters, but you better be ready for them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's kind of like the latest in EVE Online. It's definitely a promotional point that CCP is using, the game that makes EVE Online, to show what the game's capable of, because it's really advanced gameplay. Abyssal Space was very advanced, and now Invasions is mutating what is known as the basic EVE Online. The known universe is now starting to twist and turn with a lot of technology that was built in abyssal space, or for the abyssal space, like dungeons, to put it in a easy term to understand. So,
and a lot of people don't understand, haven't really, like, if you haven't been paying attention, you may think of invasion content as simply being these footholds and the sites within them and very incursion-y. But in the last couple of months, we've actually seen an expansion of what it means to be incursion content. So we now see the Rasnaborg, which are a set of 1 to 5 frigates that could be infecting any given highsec system on a day. We see emergent conduits, which is a new kind of ANOM, which has become extraordinarily popular among certain players.
Something that you can play by yourself, and it's pretty interesting and rewarding.
Right. So all of these play with different mechanics and are introducing more than just the invasion proper. So like now, it used to be that a highsec system had 2 states. They're either empty or as an incursion. Now it can be empty, have a Rasnaborg, have an emergent, be a perimeter, be an adjacent, be a foothold, or be an incursion. So 8 different states that any given system can be. This is what they mean by adding terrain to EVE Online.
Right. That was exactly the point I was going to make. They're adding terrain to a very flat EVE Online. Used to be you travel from one system to the next, and one looked like the next, except that maybe the sun, a long time ago, the suns all looked the same. The only thing that changed was the backdrop. Dodixie and that constellation was red. But if you travel to the next system, it would change from red to like a green. And then they changed the suns, and the suns started giving color to the systems. But there was still always flat terrain. Whatever system you traveled when, there was very few differences. It's just color differences. But now you have state differences and actually danger differences. All that is an attempt to add more terrain, as they call it, landscape. You can go up into a mountain, you can go down into a valley. Like, there's differences between systems that is becoming more organic.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. I tried to mute real quick. Yeah, and these things are kind of moving around at different rates, right? Like, so an incursion will last for about 3 to 4 days, 2 to 4 days. It seems like emergent conduits, some of them don't move at all. Like Valor has had an emergent conduit basically every day, although some of them seem to. And then Rasnaborg seem to change daily. So you've got different kinds of fluctuation of terrain that kind of create this breakup pattern of shifting not only danger but opportunities, right? Because Rasnaborg are actually really fun to hunt and are good D-space scan practice. Emergent conduits are incredibly interesting for those people who want to test themselves in their ships and just roll sites over and over and over again to see who can make the best and most efficient system. The invasions not only have the sites, but as I alluded to earlier, there's a mining bonus, which, as I pointed out yesterday on Talking in Stations, we got the basically breaking news that we have not seen warp-ins to sealed conduits since last Tuesday. So it seems like conduits within invasion sites are also now safe to be mined in again, which is a huge deal because those rocks are pretty nice. They're not as nice as, like, say, Nullsec or like a really good moon or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for just like a new player or like a player that isn't really connected to very many people, it offers an opportunity to say, I'm going to take a little bit more risk and get a little bit more reward.
Yeah.
And the rocks are bulky, they can't be compressed, so there's a whole bunch of considerations when it comes to moving this crap around, getting it done. But if you get past all of that, then you get not only better rocks than normal, but you get up to 40 and now soon to be 50% mining speed buff under the correct conditions to be able to mine this stuff faster.
And you're not bothered at the same time, right? Because these things aren't going to warp in on you, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah. If this continues to be true, when it first came out, the invasion roaming packs did not warp to sealed conduits. And so it was recommended that people use these things as opportunities for miners that want to like up their game a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then during the drifter attacks, once Nullsec complained that the drifters were not actually attacking anomalies and therefore weren't killing the ratters, they pulled the drifters back for a couple days and then they came back with a different behavior. Well, when they came back with a different behavior, it also impacted the Triglavians' behavior. And after that point on, the Triglavians also warped to even sealed conduits. So I don't know if that was necessarily what they wanted, but then now about 2-3 weeks ago, right before it went to Lowsec, we got a patch that added in a gate in front of the World Arc, which had this interesting consequence of making it so that these roaming packs could not warp in on the gate or on the World Arc. Because if they tried to warp in on the World Arc, they would actually land on the gate, just like everybody else. And they didn't know how to take the gate. And so you wouldn't ever get warp-ins in the World Arc anymore. And so that was kind of confusing. And then now, like 2 weeks later, they've now fixed it, quote unquote, to make it so that warp-ins don't happen in the other sites that are sealed as well.
Yeah, we have a comment from Hiram Maxim 87. He says, oh boy, every single time. He says, newer players are less likely to be using compression, which is true, but these sites aren't necessarily for new players.
Well, I mean, I see them as kind of like the next step, right? So like I'm mining with my group, or I'm mining ore. I don't have an Athenor, so I don't have my own moon to mine, but I don't want to just mine this crappy Veldspar all day. And so I'm going to get my buddy with his Orca and a couple of our, Ventures or Covetors or whatever, and we're going to just go mine an invasion. Now, the thing is that what that means is that a single ship has a difficult time doing it because you're going to fill up your cargo bay way quicker than you're going to actually get real value. So using something like an Orca to haul, it becomes very important. And then, like I said, it can't be compressed, and so moving it out becomes kind of a pain. But remember, invasions are temporary. So all you kind of have to do is wait for the invasion to shut down, and then you can move it out however you want. It's still big and bulky and can't be compressed in the station or in the structures. But once again, it's just extra hoops that you have to jump through, extra challenges that you have to overcome, but the rewards are there for those who are willing to.
Yeah. Well, and again, I don't see invasions as beginner content at all. I think it's advanced players who want to do cooperative stuff in an environment where they test themselves against nature. And it looks like nature is being developed in EVE Online. I think that's a significant thing.
Well, I would say that it's there are opportunities for all skill levels. So a Rasnaborg pack could probably be taken on by one or two guys that are basically straight out of bloodstained stars, or maybe like at the point of doing level 3 missions, right?
Mhm.
Like a well done cruiser or battle cruiser should be able to go after Resonabor packs without any problem whatsoever. And then a decent battle cruiser to battleship should be able to deal with the emergent conduits. So we're actually seeing this nice ramp up process where CCP is giving people this opportunity, this content where it's like, first you do the tutorial, then you hunt Rasnaborgs, then you do emergence, then you do the abyss, then you do the various invasions. And if you've done all of that content, then within a month or two, you're going to be a pretty darn good pilot.
Yeah. You'll at least have some confidence, right? To go out there and say, uh, I could maybe compete with somebody. I won't be humiliated, which is what keeps people from participating.
Right. Well, I mean, like for instance, so we said it before, the invasion, or sorry, the abyss. You learn tracking, you learn signature radius, you learn all the different kinds of E-war. The Triglavians use every E-war, and they can have the E-war used on them. So unlike other NPCs, you can rep Triglavians, you can ship scan Triglavians, you can jam Triglavians. And so this introduces all these kinds of ways to experiment with this content that not only teaches you about the Triglavians, but teaches you the mechanics of the game itself.
Yeah, it's wild. All right, I know that you have limited time, so is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before you have to go?
Sure. Let's talk about what we're expecting to see a little bit in this upcoming week, because we do see a new site that's coming tomorrow called the Stellar Accelerator that will be appearing in foothold systems of Triglavian invasions. This is CCP's latest experiment to figuring out deployable weather systems.
Yeah.
These structures, when they are assembled, which they'll apparently be assembled by the Triglavians, when they are up and active, they will increase the tracking speed, the explosion velocity of missiles, and they will once again increase mining speed, but there will also be like a reduction, 30% reduction in warp speed. So these effects will layer on top of, I presume, will layer on top of the normal invasion buffs and debuffs, which means that these structures will represent yet another state that a system can be in. But the difference is that this state, unlike the previous ones, can be absolutely controlled by the player. These beacons can be destroyed. So this brings me to my main question about these things. Most of those bonuses seem actually really good for invasion runners, right? These the Triglavians are really hard to hit. Application is key to Triglavian invasions, and therefore an additional explosion velocity and additional tracking is only good for the people running the sites. In addition to that, the mining speed bonus is of course good for players, and actually the warp speed penalty helps in weird ways where it may affect the Triglavians in warping, especially as they readjust in things like majors. But also, it may help them like prevent gankers, maybe,
Mhm.
where they're being slowed down, or you have more time to detect them. There's more things that go wrong. But either way, the real question is, what will the player base do with these structures? Will they end up leaving them up? Will they tear them down? Will there be a reward for tearing them down? Are people going to destroy them to troll the people that are trying to run it? It's unknown at this time, and I'm really excited.
Oh, cool. A lot to look forward to on that.
Yep. Let's see. Anything else? Also, as I alluded to earlier,
Mhm.
we see two new types of skins, actually three types of skins that are now coming soon. One is a pretty cool green and yellow Halloween skin,
See if
or
I can.
Halloween themed skin. But then the one that has been getting the most buzz has been the new Vegas skins, which are now visible, which are amazing.
See if I can
Um,
bring one of those up.
I posted you the picture of the GIF that I took of
Yeah, here it is.
the Ikatursa. Flashing lights, holographic stars. It is super over the top. Some people are like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to skin this Gotti." It's literally the last E Vegas skin, guys. Like there cannot be a more gaudier skin.
It's just, Has a lot of flash, that's for sure.
Now, the other interesting thing that people are noting is that star there looks very similar to the Alliance logo, which has got a lot of people excited about the idea of there being Alliance logo holograms added to these things. I don't think that that's happening in this one, just based on what I've seen. But I mean, they could very well be like pushing that technology. We know they're working on that kind of like customizable hologram visuals for things like Alliance logos. So this also could represent being one step closer towards that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean that's been something that people have wanted for a while. Some people have wanted for a long time. A little bit late. I think the Alliance tournament needs to come back before they need Alliance tournament logos on there. But Alliance logos is something that people have wanted for a long time, so that they can fly in their fleets with their flags up on their own ships and all of that.
Oh
So
boy,
who knows?
the Alliance tournament is a whole nother ball of
Yeah,
wax.
we won't get into that. Let's not derail.
Yeah,
Oh, that's pretty cool. Thanks for sending me that video.
yeah. And then, I mean, I guess the bottom line is that there is a lot of I guess doom and gloom happening among the Eve player base right now. And the issue is that right now we're in a really refractory period. We're right before Eve Vegas. And Eve Vegas has historically been the big time to announce big things for the winter / next spring, right? Because it is the big event before FanFest, which would be next spring.
Before Eve Vegas, they used to do these announcements. I believe they used to do these announcements around this time, Alliance Tournament. I think Alliance Tournament used to happen, was it twice a year? But the Alliance Tournament used to be a place where they made announcements because they had everybody's attention. But now they have basically what is considered the fan fest for the U.S. market, and that is Eve Vegas, although that's now going to change in the future. But this is the last one. And this is where they make announcements now, as you were saying, for the winter.
Right. Like Citadels was announced during Eve Vegas. I think Invasions might have been, or Incursions.
Capital changes. All the stuff for
not Abyss, but the one after the Abyss was announced at Eve Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, this month's patch doesn't have a huge amount of like super crazy stuff, because if we are moving into something big that's coming, which has been pointed out, there is, like, if you just look at the minutes, there are giant holes in the minutes, which represent to me things that are coming that we don't know about, right? So hopefully we'll have more information about it then. And I'm not saying it's going to be great, but what I am saying is that if you see people talking about how CCP has not said or done anything recently, even in years in which there hasn't been as much consternation as there has been this year, like, that happens. That I remember many times early October, everybody's like, "Oh my God, we haven't heard anything. We don't know what's going on." I've even said it before. I'm making fun of my own voice in that one.
Sound like a Muppet.
And then like Vegas comes out and we're like, "Oh, right, that's right. There's like a big announcement. Got it."
Yeah.
So I'm just exercise caution.
Yeah, and this year is different too because they have a world tour going on. So Vegas isn't the only game in town. They still have Eve London after Eve Vegas. Next year it returns to normal, but this year they've been traveling all over the world, making small announcements and some large announcements during these events. So it's if it's not here, there may be more. In a month or two when the last FanFest happens, which will be in London.
And to tie this kind of together with the Alliance tournament, I remember that when they kind of announced those two things together, that there would be no real Eve Vegas or Eve FanFest this year, and there also wouldn't be Alliance tournament. And everybody was like trying to use that as a justification that it's like, oh, well, they're giving up on these things. But I think that now that we have seen the Invasion World Tour kind of play out, it's obvious that no, CCB didn't downscale. They didn't save money by not doing FanFest. Like they went to the nines this year when it came to making this Invasion World Tour work, which makes me have a little bit more hope when they say that they're going to do the other things that they said they were going to do, like let's say next year, like the Alliance tournament.
No, I think it's cool. They're exploring their fan base. They're getting out there. They're meeting them closer to their home. More people can come to these meetups or these fan fests that are closer to their home. They don't have to travel internationally to go to Iceland. It just seemed like it was a really good experiment that paid off. I was skeptical at first. I thought, well, I mean, the narrative that was coming out was that CCP messed up and they didn't book the FanFest Plaza that they needed or whatever. And so CCP screwed up and therefore they're making it up by going around. I don't know. I don't believe any of that anymore. It looks like this was a planned thing. And I talked to Hilmar and he said, yeah, we're doing this to get closer to the players. This was a year ago at Vegas. And so this year has been all about getting closer to the players. And I think they like what they saw. I think going to Russia really inspired them. I think even Eve Finland, which was at some guy's home, was an intimate affair. And it really was a nice way to explore some of what EVE Online has to offer, which is the virtual lifestyle that a lot of people think about and talk about, like us, all the time. But then either you have EVE Down Under, which was, again, some of the most hardcore players are Australian time zone players. They really have to stick it out because not a lot of people are playing when they play because of their location in the world. So again, CCP did this world tour. It was seen as an error by some people, before it happened, and it certainly wasn't an error. It was deliberate and it was effective, and I think they liked what they saw. And now what you're seeing, in my opinion, is let's do more of that sort of thing. Let's go to Russia again. So they're going to Moscow next year. Let's go to, well, not Vegas because it's really kind of a big party there. Let's go to San Diego and actually do a conference. And there's a big player base in San Diego, and they want to go there close to their homes. There's player base in LA where I'm at. So we'll
I
see.
got to pop off for at least a couple of minutes, but there's one thing that I do want to throw out here, which is that when the Invasion World Tour came out, we had no idea about the expansion at all. Like the whole idea of the invasion, EVE invasion, and all that stuff was pre-baked into this thing from the very beginning, and yet there was no clue about it until it started to play out. So for those of you who don't think that like CCP has at least some sort of idea about this story that's going forward, they have straight up said that they have basically a lot of it lined out for at least the next year to the end of the construction of JETA. So
yeah.
Things are playing out, but I'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
All right, thanks, Ashterothi. I may actually wrap up, and we'll take it up again tomorrow in patch notes. If I happen to still be here, come back. But I think I don't have much more to offer these days. I want to make these things shorter anyway. Ash, we'll see you later. Go ahead, take off.
Yeah, I guess all I'll say is that come check out my stream.
Yeah. All right, absolutely.
All right,
bye. Ashterothi, that's Twitch/Ashterothi. ASHTEROTHI. Check him out. He's on all the time doing a lot of the stuff that we just talked about, and he's your best guide for this sort of thing. Okay, let's have a look at the latest. This is where I usually go to the EVE forums and check out what people are talking about there. I don't see anything that pops out at me, but I haven't looked at it, so I don't know. Let's see. There's a lot of questions. People wanting to sell characters and just some stuff. I will actually look at that more in advance next time. On Reddit, the big news is there's no big news, it looks like. Yep. Nothing that I see that seems interesting, at least in the last 24 hours. So there we go. The most violent systems are Ethereum Reach, Delve, and Detroit. This tells you something interesting. Detroit fell to number 3. It was probably number 1 for the last few weeks, that the battles there are winding down since that war between Winter Coalition and Legacy is also winding down. One of the things that happened last week was there was a sale that was facilitated, I think, by Gobbins of Horde, who has relationships with Vili of Legacy and Naros of Winter Coalition. So he's able to be a go-between, trusted go-between. And that he basically was helping in the transition of 5 Keep Stars that were being sold to Legacy as Winter Coalition was retreating. So better to come out ahead with 100 billion, and Legacy in return gets half price keep stars. So they get to take those down and move them to where they need them, or they can leave them there and expand their holdings to Detroit. Yeah, so that's what's happening. That's fallen down to number 3. Ethereum Reach is up there at number 1. And Ethereum Reach is, I think, in the same sphere of influence that Horde has. So you might see a lot of stuff going on there. What I don't see up here is the North. There have been some great battles happening in the North as NC is going after their former ally, Sort Dragon, and doing a little bit of punishing for Sort Dragon's, I would say, letting down of his allies. So they're letting him feel it. But again, Sort Dragon is the leader of Darkness Alliance. Darkness Alliance leads the Dead Coalition, but only in administrative efforts. The real powerhouses in Dead Coalition, who have had some really good victories lately against NC and others, the real powerhouse there is actually Russian and Chinese. And you have Ranger Regiment is the one that is from China, and they've had a big showing when they need to form up. And I think what's interesting there is that ties into what we talked about, the end of the Winter Legacy war, and Winter not being able to be supported by allies that are basically Ranger Regiment. They were not able to go down there because they were fighting in the north against NC. And so it was a big diplomatic quagmire because Winter may have needed help from a group like Ranger Regiment, who was unable to go south because they were being attacked by another ally of Winter Coalition, which was NC and PL, and maybe some Horde. So it was interesting. Yeah, you made it back. So that's kind of the...
I get to look out the window for when the bus actually shows up. So we just run out there, put them on the bus, run back in, I'm done.
Good. The important things first. So that's what's going on in Nullsec. It's, I would say the one thing that... This is a really weak way of looking at it, in my opinion, but the one thing that was going on is kind of winding down. So we'll see what happens later on. Besides, I think shifting interest for me anyway is to really explore how smaller groups are behaving in highsec. That is where my interest is starting to move, because I think that's a really important part of the game. It's very exciting with things changing every week, every day. This era of chaos isn't just a nullsec era. This is a game era. That means that things are changing across the board. You're seeing stuff that was reserved for highsec moving into lowsec. You see, of course, all the stuff that we've talked about for months in nullsec happening. But in highsec, you also have stuff happening.
Yeah, it's interesting because especially with things like the invasions and all that stuff, there's been a lot more attention on highsec, and people are starting to catch on to the fact that highsec is actually not a place that's just a boring place for people to go and kind of exploit for money. For instance, right now, I just looked and more ships have been destroyed in Najara than Uedama in the last 24 hours. So those are, of course, the two checkpoints, one between Jita and Amar and one between Jita and Dodixie, and those kind of control the flow of traffic. So there's all these little things that, if you don't pay attention, it's easy to not see how the pieces move. Mm-hmm. But with all this stuff going on, it's caused people to start paying attention a little bit more. I even heard from Dunk that Brave Newbies is creating a highsec detachment to see what they can do in there. So it's an interesting time.
Well, it's word is spreading. I think you're a big evangelist.
I'm an evangelizer.
Yes, thank you. Evangelist.
Yeah.
Evangelist. Someone who sings the praises of highsec. And so maybe you're getting that gospel out. Wow, that's so religious. It doesn't even feel right saying it.
It's all right. I'm a Marian. It's cool.
Yeah. All right.
No,
I'm
I mean,
Catholic, so it's all right for me too.
it and I do want to stress, just in case people feel that like I'm just a highsecker and so promoting highsec. I come from faction warfare. I started doing this because my play style kind of fell apart already. So you know, you just you keep finding what there is to do in this game and poking at it until you can find excitement. And that's the thing, is that I'm seeing, at least in my within the people that I hang out with, a growing group of people that reject the idea of ISK per hour and are simply doing things because they can, because it's exciting, and because they want to be able to say that they've done it. And I think that's the impulse that a game like Eve really, if you think about it, should be the impulse that drives people forward in Eve, right?
Mm.
It's space. It should be about discovery and exploration and pushing yourself.
Well, it should be
Um,
whatever anybody wants it to be, but the
well,
ISK
that's
per
that.
hour has been withering as a goal, and so has aspirational ships. Those two things they were mainstays of Eve, right? You jump into the game and you're like, wow, I want to fly that huge ship and make a difference and be impressive when I arrive onto a scene. That is no longer. It doesn't have the appeal that it had before, and generating a ton of ISK, and being super rich and being able to afford very rare ships also is something that's lost its sheen because there's just too much money in the system. There's too many people who are doing these sorts of things that those lures, those goals have really faded. And that's what's,
Simply having a lot of
yeah,
money isn't enough anymore,
it
obviously,
isn't.
to hold people's attention.
Yeah. And that leaves you with the game. So are you going to play the game, or are you like, what are you doing? I don't know. I think people need to come back. They don't need to do anything, right? People can do whatever they want. But what I'm finding is, for me, that I need to look at the interesting stories, because those are the things that are rare, unique, and it can only be created by players interacting with themselves or with the environment. And I need to be surprised and interested. And those kinds of stories are happening all over the place.
Additionally, the human behavior doesn't happen in the hypothetical. So frequently, when we're talking about nullsec and conflicts and PvP in general, we talk about it from like a hypothetical. Oh, well, if they did this, and then we would just do this, and then that's kind of how things are decided. Whereas in these kinds of experiences, because there's so many micro interactions, that it's almost difficult to predict how things will go, right? So like these emergent conduits, there's no necessarily strict reason to compete. Multiple people can be rewarded, but there is a prize to be fought over at the same time. Like the Zoria loot can be valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're seeing is this kind of constellation of responses that you see from the trustworthy to the paranoid, as people either use it as an opportunity to try to make a good new friend or recruit, or become outright hostile to those coming within their sights. It's forcing player interactions in which the players decide whether or not they want to have a cooperative or competitive interaction, not where the site forces them to either be competitive or cooperative.
Yeah. So there was something else that was coming through. What was it? It was another piece of news. It didn't have to do with big ships, unfortunately.
There's mid-grade mimesis implants. There's
These will be in the game tomorrow.
Yep. There's the ability to sell items without repackaging them. I know there's a lot of people that are super excited about that change.
Yeah.
But in general, yeah, this is a quieter patch. Again, I would expect this to be kind of a setup patch for what's coming on. And we do see that. Like, they've been doing that for quite some time, is sneaking things into the game at various times. Through like Hobo Leaks, or through Singularity, to kind of put things in place, so that way we don't know when they're going to show up, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully maybe we even stop paying attention to them, and then suddenly, bam, they're there. So CCB definitely has some surprises coming, and but I don't really want to give too much more details than that at the time.
We'll see. It slipped my mind. We'll have to pick it up next time. It's totally fine. There are some announcements here that we should probably get before we go, and that is the Falcon saying that there is Fansite passes available this year, which is interesting. We didn't really expect that because the Fansite program has really been shuttered. They're going to open up a partnership program instead, and that'll probably happen sometime next year. I doubt it'll happen by the end of the year.
I'm super excited about this because this has turned my chances to go to Vegas from possible to probable.
Oh, so I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've heard that it's not locked in yet, but the idea is that this program will be the reason why I'm able to go to Vegas.
This Fansite Pass program you're talking about?
Yep.
Or? Oh, okay, yeah. Great. So what it describes is, and we'll go ahead and click on it here because we're on Twitter. When we click on it, it talks about the criteria for what a Fansite is. Who's eligible for complimentary passes? All community contributors that fit the following categories: registered Fansites, recognized streamers who are part of the CCP Streamers Discord. It also talks about if you are an operator in Eve media site that is represented on the CCP company Slack server, then you will be reached out to by CCP Convict, who's the latest community rep. So those are the three ways, essentially. Either media...
If I could take a step back real quick.
Yeah.
So there was this Fansite program for years and years and years where basically if you operated a blog or Talking in Stations or Crossing Zebras or some sort of website that people went to frequently for the purposes of Eve, basically by itself, then you would be registered as a Fansite. And that gave you several perks. The biggest two would be that you would have 2 accounts paid for free for the year. And then secondly, you would get up to 2 tickets for some sort of event like FanFest or Vegas. So like Hydrostatic Podcast had that at one point. But when CCP Logibro went away.
Sorry, I remember when I screwed up your picture. In retrospect, I always meant to apologize for this, but right. Ashterothi was leader of Hydrostatic Podcast. In my opinion, he was the leader because he was the host. And don't correct me yet. And they had 2 other guys that were with him. There were what's his name? Fyridian
and Lock Fox.
And Lock Fox, right? Great guys. Love those guys. And the 3 of them to me were like the Beatles of podcasting. So they had this podcast that was on, and they were big fans of CCP Siegel, who happened to be there that Eve Vegas. And so I was talking to Fyridian, I think, and Siegel walked by and they grabbed her and said, "Can we have a picture?" So naturally, I stayed in the picture. So instead of Hydrostatic with CCP Siegel, it was Hydrostatic, CCP Siegel, and this other guy.
Oh, Matterall, you can be an honorary member of Hydrostatic. It's okay.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. That's awesome. Anyway,
I will correct you, though. Fyridian was the producer. It was his.
He's the one that did the engineering.
A ton of work to make that work.
Absolutely. He is a superstar. Yeah.
So, but at any rate, the idea is that they had this Fansite system, and then after CCP Logibro left the company, that sort of went off into the wayside. And so this is the first actual formal talking about this program again since then. So I think that this means more than just Eve Vegas. This is really exciting for anyone who makes Eve content.
I'm not sure I understand it. It's the CCP streamer part of it. Can you explain that? Because I don't know what that is. This is the streamers
don't
Discord.
Know. I'm going to have to verify what they mean by that. I don't know if they mean Streamfleet's Discord or...
Yeah, it could be Streamfleet's Discord. Yeah.
I know that I will say that I've checked in with Miss Moses about all this morning and a few other people. And so I know that there's a level of legitimacy to all of this, but I don't know the details enough to answer those kinds of questions yet.
Yeah, we'll find out, and maybe tomorrow we'll give more information. But it is interesting. I think it's unexpected, maybe because it's the last Eve Vegas Fan Fest or the Eve Vegas meetup that they're going to have. Made some exceptions to get more media types there. Who knows? I don't know. But it's interesting. And it's really generous. So there looks like there will be 2 passes per streamer organization. I imagine that's for a streamer and 1 guest. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it's always been It's always been 2 tickets for
Oh,
a fan site. It's just
so if you want to bring a significant other or something like that, it makes sense.
yeah. Well, I mean, like originally, for example, when we went, like Hydrostatic got 2, which paid for me and Phiridians, and then Lockfox got his own for him and I think his wife because of Eve Prosper. So like we had 2 fan sites, and therefore it provided us a total of 4 tickets.
You guys were covered. Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually get in because I normally speak at eVegas, or at least the last 3 out of 4 years. And the year I didn't speak, I was, I think it was part of the either even News 24 or INN. I forget. I think it was probably INN or TMC. And so I was there doing a lot of interviewing and trying to get people's impressions behind the scenes on what they liked, and I was publishing those videos with the help
I
of
remember that.
yeah, Caleb and Skeptic, who set up a live streaming thing. And so we were, Skeptic did a lot of work on that. He was putting in a lot of live video from the concert, and I think got 20,000. The live videos got like 20,000 hits, so they were successful.
But see, now I hadn't even thought of this, and now you've got my tinfoil activated.
Mm-hmm.
I've decided, thanks to what you just said, that the reason why they're doing this now is because what they have to announce in Vegas is so exciting that they want all the media guys there.
Well,
Anybody
this is
who's
different.
important.
No, this is not media. This is Fansite. So there's a difference.
Well, Eve Media, like the
All
us.
right, but to sell it to internally, I guess. But right here it says if you were operating Eve Media, that's a whole different professional level thing. Yeah.
Okay, well,
And you'll be
either
contacted
way,
separately.
I'm just saying they care about people being there. I don't know.
Well, who knows what they're doing for media, right? Because they may be doing this for fans, but they may be doing twice the push for media. They may actually.
It is obvious that CCP is kind of getting to the point for the first time in a long time where they almost feel like they're ready for prime time again.
Mm-hmm.
Like for a while they weren't even advertising Eve. Like even during big events or big things that you would think would introduce a whole bunch of new players, they did 0 actual advertisements. And for a while it was like they didn't even have confidence in their own product. They didn't want people to come from the outside.
As Carnero said, you don't invite people to a game that's not quite where you want it to be,
right?
Because you only have one chance to invite one person. Maybe Eve's a little bit different, but you want to invite them when you have something that they might want.
Right. But my point is that if there's anything that this like era of chaos has done is that CCP has very much put themselves back in the limelight intentionally. They're like, Eve Online is now a game that we want people to come and check out again. And I'm really excited by that confidence coming from CCP more than anything else.
Yeah, you know what? I got to take exception with the way you said that. Era of chaos. Like, I hate that shit because I take it more seriously than that. Like, I think it's more... I know. Fair. It's just what's out there, but I don't like hearing it. It's
I have flashbacks from I have a 6-year-old, so it's Skylanders. So there's chaos. That's how I've been thinking about it this whole time. It's more making fun of the people that are like chicken littling about it rather than CCP's actual announcement of it. Either way, I digress.
Yeah, I know, but I got what you were doing. Yeah, you're using it in a sarcastic way. Yeah. Well, it's not. You don't have. The point
with all of the stuff that's been going on, it's clear that they are putting themselves in the media again.
Yeah.
Deliberately. We'll put it that way.
And they said as much on the interview with Dopamine, CCP Dopamine, and CCP Goodfella. You can hear that again on Talking in Stations. They actually say they're actually doing advertising again. And apparently people are seeing that in places. I'm not. I don't know why. But a lot of people are seeing a lot of advertising because the trailer that you go to see when this advertising hits has gotten over it's approaching 6.5 million views. And that's amazing. That's way more than any other.
There's a ton of banner ads and stuff for like buying plaques and other stuff like that. Like they're not only targeting new players, but they're saying, hey, you remember that old Eve game that you tried and then you quit? Those reasons why you quit, we fixed those. You should come try it again.
Yeah. I don't think you do that until you have something to offer. And I think they think they have something to offer, which is true. And I don't think it's dependent on emergent gameplay necessarily between Nullsec alliances, which everybody says is like the end game. Well, it's not. You see a lot of terrain developing in highsec. You see a lot of opportunities to play in small ways in either long spans of time or short spans of times with large groups or small groups, all in highsec, where you can get some of the minerals that you need. You can get some of the moon minerals you need. You can get some of the action that very nearly is PvP against the game. These are all terrain building features that have crept into the game that have made it, I think, a whole new game in some respects.
Instead of working on shovels and boots, they're working on sand, right? For the sandbox. Normally, so for years,
okay.
we the idea is that player built content, player driven goals, that is number one, and that CCP, their responsibility is to give us the better tools to do that content, as CCP Soundwave used to put it, better shovels and better boots, right, to build castles and kick them over.
Mm-hmm.
But what if there's anything that we've discovered is that on a long enough timeline, if you give the players the opportunity to make their own goals and the tools to do so, they end up doing not very interesting things. And so I think that there does need to be a certain amount of like movement of the universe that spurs action by players. Players clearly will not just generate their own conflict in spite of it. They will tend toward this safer, protective thing, because although we all want exciting content, we want safety first. And that's just a very human drive. And so without some sort of movement in the underlying sandbox, as it were, the sandcastles begin to kind of solidify and become sandstone.
Quick clarification. It is not Streamfleet players that are invited to do the FanFest passes. It is a special group of them that are on an actual CCP Discord for streaming. So it's a little more exclusive than that.
This is why I specified I don't actually know the details about anything. I know that it is actually happening, and that whatever, but I haven't gotten a chance to look into it yet.
Yeah. No, they're already advertising. They're not saving their advertising for post Vegas. The advertising is already happening, and it has been happening. And the results are pretty good. There's a lot of interest in EVE Online, as Hilmar has said on multiple occasions. But that is most clearly seen through the data point that the trailer has gotten 6.5 million views, whereas all other trailers are far less. I think the closest one is the one that everybody liked that played EVE Online, called This Is Eve. And that one, I think, has 2.5 million views, although it has different language versions, so total it might be more like 3 million. But 6.5 million dwarfs any other trailer that CCP has ever put out. And that doesn't happen because EVE players are watching it over and over again. That happens because they're drawing new eyeballs to the game. And that just shows you how much pull they have.
It also cannot be stressed enough that for the first time in my memory of EVE is in the news not because somebody screwed somebody over, not because of some 4,000 man's fight, but because of things that are happening. The drifter attacks, the tax changes, the nullsecers freaking out. Like, all of these events are getting EVE into the news in a way that is making people look at it and going, wow, that's interesting, right? Like, and the difference is that people that come in because they find that interesting, they're more likely to find an EVE that gives them what they want. Whereas somebody who reads that there's a 5,000 man battle or some grand portrayal will get into the game and be like, this is not what I expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kramer the Gamer says, I don't understand why they would spend money on advertising before they fix the retention rate. They said 80% of the resources are spent on making new players stay. So after that work is done, then they should spend the money. I would say that that's a very good point, and he's been clearly watching and listening, that they already have made the funnel better, and they describe that in the minutes. They've already a lot of the 80% effort that they're putting into new players has been happening for a while. And I thought something that was very interesting in the minutes that they didn't say. Let me just get this point out. Last year was spent becoming compliant with privacy laws in Europe. Like that's where a lot of their time went last year in 2018, which was like nobody ever talked about that. This year was talked about 80% for new players and holding the retention down. That work is already happening. It's already showing results. The advertising is moving along with it to bring in more people. So you're seeing more and more combined efforts.
Yeah. Also, if I could just take off my player hat for a little bit and put on like my more I've worked in this environment hat and look at this and say, well, what would I be doing if I knew that I had like they have a plan that's more than just right now, right? So they have an idea of what fourth quarter is going to look like. They have an idea of what first quarter is going to look like, second quarter, et cetera, of next year. They have targeted goals and whatnot. And the reason why they do that is because they have all these different departments that all kind of have to be zeroed in on the same events at the same time. So if you have this idea where it's like, well, we're going to try to bring people in and attract them in with this new content now that we've fixed the MPE or whatever in the next 4 to 6 months, then what actually is interesting is that you're also going to want to start experimenting with your advertisements. So what I would see is, I'm actually almost disappointed in how little I'm seeing the use of like A/B testing for things like the launcher for various advertisements on like Reddit and whatnot. Like start testing your information passages. The fact that there has been like almost no A/B testing in the launcher is it either hasn't happened or I haven't noticed it.
You wouldn't
But
see it. You would see A or B. You wouldn't see both.
It's true, but I mean, like we would collectively, I would like to think, detect it, but maybe not. Maybe not. But either way, my point is that when you're gathering data, especially on a summer like this, which is really what it's all about, right? You're doing a lot of things to collect a lot of different kinds of data. One of those data points that you're going to want to get is which advertisements not only resonate with people, but get people that respond a different way. It may be, in fact, that somebody who comes in through one promotional style actually has a much higher % chance of being successful than somebody who isn't. And those are things that are extraordinarily useful to know as well.
Yeah.
And you want to learn those things early so they can experiment now when it's still not kind of full on explosive. So that way, when they have their full court press, they have a well-defined, researched, market-proven strategy.
Right. All right. I want to direct your attention to this eForum post in PvE Gameplay Center. And this is under Missions Abyss. It says, do any Abyss co-op channels exist? Because they want to match up. I believe that's the PvP, right? The matchups? Or is that
well
together? Is it?
There is the Abyssal Lurker, probably to play together, because you can't. Okay. You don't match up. You just go through the conduit and you're hooked up with somebody else that also went through the conduit. But you do need to match up for like 3-man frigates, for example.
Yeah.
Those are cooperative. So we do have an Abyssal Lurkers chat in game, and we recently have also started the Emerging Lurkers chat for those who wish to run emerging conduits. And both those chats are really good for not only community to find people who are also running it to discuss it with, but a lot of like the best fits for those activities are also maintained in like the MOTD and such.
Oh, well, you may want to find this thread and post that in there because it doesn't look like anybody gives them the answer. It's just a lot of...
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
It's just a lot of people with no answers, just writing stuff. So give them answers. Give them answers, Ash. All right.
I'm here to do, man.
That's what I'm here to do. Give answers. Right? Yeah, listen, this is it's been a lot of fun. It's encouraging talking to you, Ash, and we'll wrap it up for today. We will be back next week. Any last comments you have that you want to talk about?
All I'm going to say is that tomorrow in particular, we're going to be experimenting with these new stellar arrays. So please come check out my stream, twitch.tv/Ashterothi tomorrow. And pretty much any Monday through Thursday for invasion content. But tomorrow should be particularly interesting, explosive, and science-y.
Yeah. Good. Okay, a little bit of a program note, and this is a perfect timing for this question. TIS Daily, once a week only now? The answer is no. I took last week off because I got busy in real life. So I decided instead of taking one day off, I would take the entire week off. And so I am back today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back the rest of the week. And we'll continue to do this as long as you guys enjoy what you're listening to and you guys show up. Otherwise, I could have all these conversations in private. So if you like this show, let me know. There's different ways to let us know. One is to just say so in chat here like you are. Thank you very much. And you can also join our Discord. You can find that at talkinginstations.com. Come into Discord and hang out with us there. You can see some of the chat, participate in the chat, or just lurk. You can say hello to anybody who has a blue tag or a purple tag. Those are the people that help with this. And of course, you can always help us by contributing either through Twitch or our preference is Patreon. That's Patreon/Matterall. And you can just become a sponsor, and that would be fantastic. But anyway, all of those things are great. Oh, and the final one is if you could write us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this, we would appreciate that kind of stuff. It makes it easier for it to surface, and it shows that it's popular, and that makes it surface better for other people. So that's all that you can do in order to keep these things going. Again, I can always have these conversations in private, but we try to bring them to you at least once a day so that you can have something to listen to on your commute or just hang out with us in real time like you are. And I want to thank you guys for participating in the chat and putting up questions and putting up criticisms and putting up attaboys. Appreciate all that stuff. Thank you guys. Okay. Thanks, Ash. You're great. We'll see you tomorrow.
Have a good one.